Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the January 23rd, 2013 Pittsburgh Board of Public Education Legislative Meeting. Before we begin this evening, I'd like to remind everyone to turn off all cell phones and pagers or put them on vibrate. Would everyone please rise so we can salute the flag? Thank you. As is our tradition and procedure before a legislative meeting, we would like to recognize students and employees of the Pittsburgh Public School District. I'd like to ask board members to please come forward, and I will turn this portion of the meeting over to Dr. Lane, who has some special remarks this evening.
Okay, are we good? Okay. January is School Directors Recognition Month, a time when districts across the state celebrate the dedicated individuals working to ensure that every child, every day, receives the education he or she deserves. Each year, we salute a special group within the Pittsburgh Public Schools, our 9 elected members of the school board. These unpaid volunteers spend at least 20 hours a month in school service and help us to reach our goals of accelerating student achievement, eliminating racial disparities, and becoming a district of first choice. They vote on multi-million-dollar budgets, select textbooks, hire staff, review curriculum, just to name a few things on their lengthy to-do list. As elected officials, they are entrusted by the community to be their voice in the district. They are your friends, neighbors, community leaders, and even parents at your child's school. So throughout this month, we will ask everyone in the community to thank board members for their time and effort, for making difficult decisions on our behalf, for listening to our concerns, and for serving our children. To show our appreciation for your dedicated service to the Pittsburgh Public Schools, we are presenting each of you a certificate of appreciation and a copy of a book entitled The Storm by Cynthia Ryland. The Storm is part of the district's 2nd grade Common Core curriculum. Some of our students who will read the book this year are here tonight to help out with your presentation. In the past, 2nd graders read excerpts from novels. This year, every 2nd grade student in every school will read an entire novel, cover to cover. Building on the excellent Building on the excellent foundation of standards states have laid, the Common Core state standards provide our young people with a high-quality, rigorous education. Each copy of The Storm contains a book plate with the following inscription. The book is presented on behalf of your name, board members, in appreciation of your commitment to the students of the Pittsburgh Public Schools as a member of the Board of Public Education. School Director Recognition Month, January 23rd, 2013. You may choose to make this book a gift to your high school library in your district, or to the Public Library of Pittsburgh, the Carnegie Libraries, or to a special child in your life. So now we're going to go district by district. Representing District 1 and Board President Shireen Shealy is Pierce. Okay, Pierce, are you going to do it for us? Okay, great. So can you provide that to Ms. Shealy, please? Thank you. Thank you, Pierce. He's kicking it off for us. Thank you very much, Pierce. Okay. And Pierce, what's his name? Pugh? Okay, Pugh. I wanted to make sure I had the right last name, Pierce Pugh. Representing District 2 and Dr. Regina Hawley are Devon Johnson and Raylyn Creighton from Pittsburgh Fulton. Representing District 3 and Board First Vice President Thomas Sumter are Sincere Smith and Dreona Lewis. Representing District 4 and Board Second Vice President William Eisler is Marcus Green and Marcus Green at Pittsburgh Linden. Representing District 5, Teresa Calese, are brothers Dominic and Alexander Victoria from Pittsburgh Minadeo. Representing District 6, Sherry Hazuda, are Ramaya Holiday from Pittsburgh is Ramaya Holiday, and David Gurowski from Pittsburgh Carmelt. Representing District 7, Jean Fink, is Nishal Kareel of Pittsburgh Concord. Representing District 8, Mark Brentley, is Nikhil Hunter and John A. Taggart from Pittsburgh Grandview. And representing District 9, Floyd McRae, is Ethan Schaffler. Okay, now we also have some students here today with another special gift for our board members. Each of our magnet schools is made up from students coming from every single district our board members serve. So to represent all 25,000 plus Pittsburgh Public School students, Pittsburgh Carmelt is here to literally give the board a hand. All 900 students at Carmelt traced their hands and cut out cards. The hands were then joined together and placed in decorated gift boxes with words such as "Have a good day" and "Wonderful" written on the outside. From all of the staff at the Pittsburgh Public Schools, thank you for the devotion to the future of our young people and their families that you demonstrate through your service as members of the Pittsburgh Board of Public Education. We'll have our Carmelt students come forward and give them your hands. You're going to give them a hand? Okay. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. That concludes our board recognition. Yeah, now we're finished. Yep. Hi. Hi.
Thank you, Dr. Lane, and thanks to all the staff who participated in preparing that wonderful treat for the board. Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call?
Mr. Brentley?
Here.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Here.
Mrs. Fink?
Here.
Mrs. Zuda?
Here.
Dr. Holly? Mr. Eisler?
Present.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Mr. Sumter?
Present.
Ms. Shealy?
Here.
All members present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. At this time, I'd like to ask Mr. Sumter to share our core beliefs and commitments.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Pittsburgh Board of Education will educate all children to the highest level of academic achievement, provide a safe and orderly environment for all students and employees, provide efficient and effective support for all students, families, teachers, and administrators, will distribute resources in an efficient and equitable manner to address the needs of all students to the maximum extent feasible, and will improve public confidence and encourage strong parent-community engagement in the district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Will everyone please turn to the minutes of December 19th, 2012 and January 16th, 2013. Are there any corrections, deletions, or additions? Mr. Eisler?
Move to approve.
Mr. Eisler and Mrs. Khaleesi. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. The minutes are approved. At this time, I'd like to read the executive session statements. In addition to executive sessions announced at the legislative meeting of December 19, 2012, the board met in executive sessions on January 16, 2013, and immediately before this legislative meeting to discuss various personnel matters that may include, but are not limited to, the administrative vacancies and positions opened and closed. Finally, at the executive session immediately before this legislative meeting, the board discussed student discipline cases that involve violations of various portions of the Student Code of Conduct. The board does not vote at executive session. Sorry. I would like to, thank you. Have everyone turn to page 9 of 9 of the Committee on Education report. And I would like to give you the student suspension, transfer, and expulsion numbers for the month. 63 students suspended for 4 to 10 days. 0 students suspended for 4 to 10 days and transferred to another Pittsburgh public school. 5 students expelled out of school for 11 days or more. 0 students expelled out of school 11 days or more and transferred to another public school, Pittsburgh public school. Item 15 in the Committee on Education was pulled for further discussion at agenda review. Are there any additional items that one would like to, in the Committee on Education, that board members would like pulled at this time? Seeing none, we will begin discussion on item 15. The resolution to approve the charter for Propel Hazelwood Charter School. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. All of my questions did get answered through the weekend, so I have no further questions, which is why I asked for it to be pulled.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Anyone else? Any other discussion in education? Mr. Brentley.
Yes, I want to, on that item number 15, raise the concerns about the brief history of what's happened to this region or this part of the city, this community, and why this item is here before us. Remember, over the last 6 or 7 years, this is one of those areas which we simply neglected as a board. Had an opportunity to give, to keep the school open, and because of quite a few questionable reasons, we closed the school. There is no other community in this city that's taken the hit that Hazelwood has taken from Gladstone and then changing to school configurations. That building is still sitting here, and then eventually the closing of Bergwin. We had an applicant who submitted an application for a charter school, and this board gave him pure hell. It is, in my opinion, maybe still questioned or still it's somehow in some kind of appeal process. But the point is that we did not act appropriately as a board to give this school what they need in terms of offering education for their students. In fact, we agreed to not only close Bergwin, but those kids were bused to keep other schools open. And so now we have another charter school. And I've said before, the charter school process is highly political, based upon who's submitting it, and their connections determines if the charter school is approved. I made the comments at the agenda review that this is the same school that has another school that they are an affiliate of or with, and they did not make AYP. So as a board member, I am here today, and we're supposed to approve this, sending those kids to a school that has history, that did not make its AYP in the city of Pittsburgh, and not only that, but to not give them the highest and the best facility available. What should be before us today is a move to reopen Bergwin, restore Hazelwood, just like we've given every other neighborhood the opportunity. So that's what I am supporting, and that is restoring Hazelwood. And to those board members who were actively involved in not supporting the Imagine application, actually withheld the application when an interested party wanted to purchase Bergwin to provide schools. We never even allowed it to come before this board to vote. And so now, because of the heavy hand of politics, we're supposed to approve this particular one that's not in a school building. And so I'm here to say that Bergwin students in that community should have the highest and best opportunity, just like we work very hard to give every other student in this district. They should not be bused. They should be in the process, we should be in the process of allowing him the full access of the Bergwin school, and we should be about that business. So I will not be supporting this item here before us today. And actually, at some point, maybe not today, I will make some kind of motion to direct our staff to begin to reopen the Bergwin School and to give us some kind of report on what it would take for us to bring that school back online and to provide its services. Finally, I had a brief conversation with Latul Love afterwards, and he said, man, we just want a school in our building. I said, I understand. I said, I just want to make sure the community's involved. He said, hey, we're just called here. We had one meeting. And so this is obviously driven by some other issues. And so here we are now, we're going to approve this when we clearly showed a difference in how we handled another applicant, and we cannot leave out the issue of race. Yes, the other applicant was a group of educated African-American educators with some had ties to the district, worked very hard, wanted to put a great product before us, and we threw up all kinds of obstacles. So, in my opinion, here is an opportunity for this board to right a wrong. Are we allowing the Hazelwood community and students full access to public education the way that it should? And if so, then we should be about the business of moving forward to reopen the Bergwin School. So I will be supporting that. I cannot support this motion. And secondly, we tend to move quickly and give certain applicants certain kinds of treatment. This same applicant, when applying for the North Side, I know that I directed 2 or 3 organizations that were interested in renting the Columbus School. At that time, we were told, no, we don't rent and we don't lease. This applicant's come in and has one of the first, if not the only, rental or lease agreement of our building with a charter school. And so we have to find a way to just even the playing field. And the way that you do that is to clearly state here, we appreciate their concern and their interest, but this one, we as a board, we have to go in and simply do the right thing. So I'm encouraging everyone here, allow them the opportunity to have a full school, great building, in great shape with a little bit of dusting off that community that's starting to move can now boast and say, we have a full school. We have our ability. Let them put a committee together if they want to come back and change the name, and then allow them to do that. But this time, we as a district should be supporting the reopening of the Bergwin School. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Dr. Hawley?
I'm going to agree with some of the comments made by my colleague, Mr. Brentley, but I want to go a little bit further and talk about the charter school law. Again, I'm not against charter schools. I'm for good schools. And I'm not set here to say that Propel cannot make a good school. I'm just saying that the educational opportunities that Propel is proposing, we already do within the Pittsburgh Public Schools. Now, one other thing that I'd like to mention is that for the residents in Hazelwood, this does not mean that they will automatically be allowed to attend this new charter school. And I think that that's one thing that people do not understand. If the school becomes highly subscribed, then they will go to a lottery. So that means, so we're still in the same position, that those Hazelwood students will still be leaving that community to go to another school that's offered by the Pittsburgh Public Schools. So that's my concern. One of my major concerns that we're talking about opening up a school in Hazelwood, but it's not necessarily going to be for the children that are in Hazelwood. Now, Mr. Weiss, please tell me, does the charter law state that you can have a school only, a charter school only for the children within that neighborhood?
No, it does not say that. The sponsoring district does have preference to students outside of the city, but it cannot be confined just to the neighborhood.
So with that in mind, the idea that that the charter school is going to make a school for the students in Hazelwood is false. The children are not going to be the only children that can apply to go to that school. So I can't say definitively that the children in Hazelwood will have that school as their school. And I will agree with Mr. Brentley wholeheartedly on the issue of the closure of Bergwin. Bergwin should have never been closed. That school should have stayed open for the students in that community, primarily because in Hazelwood there is no school. We're not talking about there might be a middle school there or a high school down the street. There is no school in that community. And I'm hoping, and I will be supporting you, Mr. Brentley, on the idea of reopening Bergwin and making it into a community school that parents will want to take their students to and be very happy and comfortable there with their children learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Any other comments on this item or other items, Mr. Sumter?
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Because of the applications that have come before us, because of the individuals that have come to public hearing, there's obviously a need for an education facility in, the Hazelwood community. The grief that students from Hazelwood run into as they're transported throughout the district happens in certain communities, certain neighborhoods. The need is there. I do have some concern for the reuse of the Bergwin School building. So however it plays out, that is, the ultimate goal. I think because it's been mentioned that this board is responsible for the education of the children and responsible for either making certain communities whole or not necessarily whole, but at least would that offset the transportation cost of the students in Hazelwood to not have to be bused. I'm not sure if we have the numbers of how many elementary or how many high school students are in Hazelwood, but those are things to consider, that reusing a school or putting a school in there would offset our transportation cost. In what way? So if we look at it from a standpoint of how the money balances out, and as we look at it in terms of addressing a real need, I mean, it's been put before this board several times, the need in that community. I think we need to consider all that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Mr. Brentley?
Yes. Dr. Lane, can you tell me, the item that's before us, what exactly are we voting on? I mean, what is the cost to the district?
Mr. Brentley, the item you're voting on is whether or not you vote to approve the charter school application that was presented to you. The cost of the district is not a part of that item, since, especially because of the fact that in the charter school law, that's not one of the factors that you can consider in approval or not approval. But depending on the number of students that attend the school, at our current per pupil cost in terms of charter schools, it will run for a regular ed student about $12,000 a child. And for a special education student, I believe it's 26, is that right? 26,000 per child.
But doctor, we voted on other applications where we had a figure on what it would cost.
Not on charter schools. At least in the time I've been here, we have not given you those data.
The Urban League application, which gave, I think it was a 5-year application, and it was also renewal, but in the original one, it said X amount of $1 million would be the cost, and then if we requested, there would be some kind of breakdown of how. And so how do you vote on something with no dollar amount?
Mr. Brentley, as I said, you can take the number of students times that cost, and that's what it would be.
Yeah, but doctor, let me just say that, and thank you for sharing that. We're directors. We can only vote on what's before us. And so if you're saying take the number and times it by that, that is not what's before us. This is like a blank check. And so they can actually, if they were to come with 300 kids at the rate of $26,000, or the figure that you gave, per child, we are obligated to pay it.
Mr. Brentley, that's true. For any charter school that we have students in attendance, the board and the district is obligated to pay the per student cost, and the 26 is for a student that's receiving special ed services, not for every child.
Well, I definitely have a problem here, doctor. You look, and I can remember voting on applications, seeing those dollars there, and we knew exactly what we were working with in terms of the formula. First year, they're going to do 5th grade examples. First graders, 5th graders, second year to be 6th graders at X amount of cost per student. Our goal is 100, and so on. We had something to work with. How do you allow someone or an item to come before us, and we simply don't, so we don't even know what the impact would be on our budget with this the way it's presently written?
Mr. Brentley, if you would like me to go calculate these numbers and we can get the number that was proposed for the school and do the math, I can certainly do that. But if you ask me sitting here now, no, I don't have it in front of me. As I said, I'm perfectly willing to answer the board's questions, but I need a little bit of notice. And
well,
so,
thank you, doctor. But this is then I'm going to make a motion that this item be tabled. Doctor, this should have been before us. We should know exactly what the impact is. I know we can't vote based upon that, but we should know what financial obligation. Nobody votes to give somebody a blank check. Nobody does that.
Mr. Brentley, Mr. Camarda has done some math right here, and he's saying we'd be between 3.6 and 4 million annually.
Well, thank you, Mr. Camarda. I'm upset at the fact that it's not here and before us.
Excuse me. I'm sorry, Mr. Brentley, because I think what they are saying is that in initial charters, that figure never appears before us. And I think Mr. Weiss, please.
If I could just address this, not the specific things that Mr. Brentley's raised, but the charter school law is very clear that the cost to the district of the students attending the school is not to be considered and cannot be considered as part of the approval process. The fact is that the cost of the district will be a function of how many students attend and what the composition of that group is. So I do not want the board to feel that by not having that figure, which it really couldn't have, that the information is deficient. Now, how the board votes is how the board votes, but in fairness to the administration, that is not a factor that can be considered by the board under the charter school law. It's a function of how many students and the cost per student that we spend, which is a formula that can vary year to year, and that cost follows the student. It's not a matter that can be considered by the board in voting a charter application, yes or no.
I'm sorry, Mr. Brentley, but you made a motion. Is there a
I
second?
did not make a motion.
Yes,
I
you
said I was going to make a motion, but I did not.
I think you said I would like to, and I
Yes,
thought
but-
that meant
No,
that
no, I
you
was
were
just
doing
stunned
it.
at what I'm hearing, that's all.
So you did not make a motion?
I did not make a
Thank you.
motion yet. But Mr. Weiss, if we're not, and I'm well aware of the fact that we can't use the cost and its impact to the district, I'm aware of that, but to not have even the number of students for the first year, isn't that required?
I believe the projected enrollment is in the application. I don't have it in front of me, but we don't know that until the school opens and is subscribed. There's no way to know exactly how many students will be there. The application contains what the projected enrollment is. I don't have that in front of me.
Okay, what is Dr. Lane, would somebody know what that number is?
This was slide 2 of the presentation that was given to the board last week. Year 1, 300 students, year 2, 350, year 3, 400, year 4, 420, and year 5, 420.
Dr. Lane, are those numbers Pittsburgh Public School students?
Cannot know that because some of these students, I think it's logical to assume a good portion of them would be, but some of them could currently be also attending other charter schools. So they can, this school would be able to pull from both groups, as well as have students from outside the district.
Okay, I am, and I'm still amazed, Doctor, that information is not before us. What is before us is so general, and some of that information, especially for the public record, to know. This is to me, this is terrible. This is, you know, I know that the politics have already been agreed upon, but my God, this community deserves better than this. And so, and the points that Dr. Holly raised, so there's a strong possibility that it's not even the chance, I mean, the opportunity, they may not even get to go to the school. I mean, once you open, they may have others or another agenda involved, and here we are, public dollars, community think that their kids have access, and that's not the case, and for us, it's simply a blind issue here. So, all right, I am, all right, that's fine, I'm finished.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mr. Sumter?
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. Mr. Weiss, if you could explain or walk us down the paths that are available, what the result would be with a yes vote, a no vote, or if this motion, or if this was tabled.
It could be a little bit of a long walk, but I'll try. Obviously, if the board approves item 15, then the school's approved. So that's rather straightforward. If this motion is defeated, then technically the board has not taken action on the application. You've only defeated this motion, and the board could either take no further action, at which time then the Propel group could appeal to the Charter Appeals Board because the board has not approved it or technically rejected it. So it's they can automatically appeal to the Charter Appeals Board without signatures that are required in a normal appeal. If the board tables it, it's a similar result. If the board defeats this motion and elects to later consider a motion to deny it, then you can vote on that. And if that passes, then there's a clear denial and there can be an appeal. So the long and short of this is that a yes vote ends the matter. A no vote entitles, a yes vote approves the school. If a majority votes that way. If the motion is defeated and nothing else occurs, there's been no formal action within the time frame under the charter school law, and the proponents of the school can then appeal to the Charter Appeals Board automatically. And that's the same result if there's a tabling. So I hope that clears it up as much as it can.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. With the no vote, and do you have to propose the rejection in the same evening, or can that occur at a later point in time?
No. The disposition of this application must occur this evening. So whatever the board does, it has to be this evening.
Okay. Again, I want to reiterate what I mentioned before, and I guess it's the overriding concern that I have is that the Berg Wooden building is reused.
Thank you, Mr. Sumter. Mr. Isley.
Ms. Shealy, I just want a point of clarification. Mr. Weiss, by law, if we do not approve this tonight, they automatically can go to an appeal.
Correct.
Okay, I just want to be clear about that. No
Yes.
matter what the issue is, their right kicks in as soon as this board makes a negative or decides not to act.
Correct.
Correct? Thank you.
Mr. Brentley.
I want to just also caution folks on scare tactics. Yes, they have the right to appeal, but we should not be forced or indirectly strong-armed into having to move and to act right now in the affirmative. And we're often backed into a corner when there's certain applications, and this is obviously one. Dr. Lane, how, or Mr. Weiss, if somebody can respond, I'll wait till they finish. Can you tell me about first of all, the Propel School on the north side and its relationship to this applicant?
The school,
Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. You want to? The school has a separate governing body. There is a Propel organization, but each school has a separate governing body and management, and I'm not, please understand, these comments do not suggest strong-arming the board. I'm only telling you the way it is. The charter school law and the decisions of the Charter Appeals Board and the courts have made very clear that in situations where you have multiple locations, each school is independent, and the performance of one school cannot be used in analyzing the application of another school from the same parent organization.
And Mr. Weiss, that is also, I'm not questioning the law, but it is also a convenient position for this applicant. Had they made AYP, I'm sure they would be pointing to the fact that local Propel, we made AYP, and this is part of our application. It was also said in so many words at the agenda review that the administrative side of the Northside Propel was either one and the same or they worked together. And so if that's the case, then they are pretty much kind of the same. And so how can they decide to judge one separately when they're pretty much following the same format that they use for the Northside School?
The rules on evaluating charter schools by school districts are set by the legislature, and the legislature in passing and amending the charter school law has made very clear that the performance of one school, good or bad, has no bearing on the application of another school, albeit from a parent organization. So if the Northside School had made AYP and it was used as a claim on this school, they would be told that the committee, the review committee, would not consider that either. That performance of the Propel Northside has no bearing on this application under the law.
Okay. Well, you know, there is no way that we can separate them. The law may be one thing, but it is clear that it is referred to as or one and the same. And when you use that, you have to really search your heart as a board member. You would never, ever put any other child in a situation where you know that they were failing and not doing at the level in which they should. And actually, parents have made those comments to us. But this case is even different because it's a new start in terms of a new school, new location, and have to start the entire process over in a different region. And so I just appeal again to this board. This community deserves the best. We should not simply be bowing to the political pressures of individuals just to approve it. Give them the best. Yes, it may take a little time for us to get the building, but may not take any time at all, because the building, our staff, we have a wonderful staff in maintaining all of our facilities. So it would not take any time. It wouldn't take much at all in getting that building prepared. And so I just want to advocate again, allow that community the true opportunity to grow and have pride in owning their own facility. Secondly, here's an opportunity to clearly right a wrong committed by this board to this particular community. Let us go on record as coming to their aid and providing the necessary opportunities that those students need. Don't shortchange them and don't do the politically correct stuff. Let's do what's right educationally for those students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brantley. Mrs. Azuda.
It's challenging how to vote for this because we live in a state that has a governor that is pro-charter schools and a legislature that continues to pass legislation that separates charter schools from school districts. They continue to have different requirements. And so when things like this come before us, while Propel has a good history of educating children in the surrounding areas, there have been concerns raised over their ability to educate our children on the north, who are attending the Northside site. But that said, we do have a committee that goes through the process of reviewing every stage and all the qualifications of the entity seeking charter school, give me the right word, to be allowed to be a charter school. And they've looked at it, and they've looked at it educationally, they've looked at it physically. Is there a building? My concern is, I mean, now we could see a charter school in every Catholic school sitting in this area. And how do you stop it? But if we have in the past, and I can only speak for the time I've been on the board, we have relied heavily on the recommendation of that committee because they do spend the time investigating it. And so I have to think that they have looked at all the possibilities and they are making the recommendation for this to pass, so I will be supporting it.
Mrs. Fink.
There we go. Now, I have been watching this charter school thing from the very beginning. The rules are different. They are allowed to have a percentage of their staff be non-certified as teachers. Just because you've been an accountant for 35 years and you decide to retire and teach, it doesn't mean you've ever had one day of pedagogy. It doesn't mean you know how to impart the knowledge that you have to the students sitting in front of you. The cyber charters are even worse. If you figure they get $12,000 a child. At the most, a cyber is going to spend about $3,500 a child. So where does the other $850 go? Where does it go? Whose pocket does it go in? What are they doing with it? Nobody at the state level seems to care. The rules are very different as far as who takes the achievement tests that the state mandates. I truly believe we have a governor who detests unions, who would like nothing better than to break the back of organized labor in this state. Charter schools are a good way for them to do that. I find the whole concept to be like something out of a bad fiction story, a horror story to be exact. I would be so uncomfortable sending a child to one of these schools because you don't know what you're getting. You don't know what kind of training they've had. I'm just so terribly uncomfortable with charter schools, period.
Thank you, Mrs. Fink. Dr. Hawley?
You know, I just want to go back to the 9 elements that the review team went through to say that we should be approving this charter school. Out of that 9, 2 they did not meet. And the 2, I'm going to say this again, and I made this very clear at the agenda review, that the 2 that they did not meet are the critical parts of making a charter school. You're supposed to have something that's innovative, something that's new, something that's going to spark interest and give children an opportunity to learn. That's not happening. I'm not saying that it's not going to be a good school because I have not attended any of the schools. I'm not going to say that. But what I am saying is that it's not something that's new or inventive. And it's not something that we can learn from and actually use in our own schools because we already do it. Everything that they offer, we have as well. Now, I wasn't on the board when you approved the one on the north side. I would have said the same thing. Anytime you have a charter school, you want that charter school to offer you something that's very different. And as being a part of a team with the Pittsburgh Public Schools that actually went out and evaluated some of our charter schools, they do have that. Whether they're made AYP or not, they are in doing something very different with the children in that school. But what we have here on paper is the same activities, instructional practices that we offer in the Pittsburgh Public Schools. We want to see something that's different. We want to see something that's unique. We want to see something that we can actually use and bring back to our schools and make our schools better or using those same kinds of activities or instructional practices. But these things are not happening there. I am not going to sit here and say that it's a bad school because I don't know. I wasn't there, I'm not there, I'm not looking at the instruction, I'm not doing an evaluation, but I am very concerned of the fact that we are giving charter school applications the ability to move on and become full charters and full schools without them meeting those 2 criteria. That's the only thing that I'm concerned about.
Thank you. Seeing Mr. Brentley.
I just want to just add this little bit that, you know, one of my colleagues just mentioned the point about the kind of governor that we have in the legislature, and I agree that is true, but we can't hang this whole thing on the governor. Wouldn't mind, but you can't hang this on him because while they may have created this atmosphere, loosely structured legislation and so on, for us, the 9 of us, the decision stops right here. So the governor cannot reach over and stop me from voting and doing the right thing for that community and for those children there. And so I just wanted to add that on the record, and also just to remind my colleagues that like anyone else who's viewing this legislative meeting here, we have the authority with the vote that will be taken today to simply do the right thing, and I want to remind them that that is the case.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mr. Eisler.
Shealy, Mr. Brantley, I don't necessarily disagree with you. However, there is a whole appeal process, and we have lost in the past. So the final authority really is vested within the executive branch of government.
And I can appreciate that, but it still does not stop us from doing the right thing. Matter of fact, I take that as almost a kind of scare tactic. You got to do it now, because if you don't, what's going to happen is that they're going to go and appeal it. Well, then maybe we should be seen doing the right thing and deal with the consequences, because we know what's right and we know what we should do. And the wonderful comments that's been raised by some of my colleagues here are ones that we have to really put in our minds, especially the points made by the educator on our board, 30-plus years in the district. It's got to be worth something, her observation of that. So, you know, that may be true, but it's also important. We have a decision, and we have the authority and the power here.
Again, I don't want to belabor this, but this is a public meeting and seen by the public, and I just want people to know what the law is. It's beyond us.
Well, yeah.
Can I recognize you? Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Please do.
You know, and I don't want to beat a dead horse either. The law is the law, but we should not be given the impression that the law says we have to approve this and we have to vote in the affirmatives for it. It does not say that. Yes, there may be some laws that got it to this point, but we still have this say-so on advancing it forward, tabling. We have options, and that's something that we should be well aware. We cannot just say if it's the law, then you back down and you just have to do it that way. That's not the case.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Seeing no additional discussion, Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call on the Committee on Education?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes, on the report. I'll be standing with the community for the best educational possibilities in Hazelwood, and I'll be voting no on number 15, page 6 of 9.
Mrs. Gleason?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on item 15.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray? I'm sorry, Dr. Hawley, I got all kind of calls in front of me here. I'm sorry.
Yes on the report as a whole, no on number 15.
Mr. McCray?
Yes on the report as a whole, and on number 15, I abstain.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes on the report as a whole, no on item 15.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
There are 4 votes against and 1 abstention on item 15, so that item is not approved. The rest of the report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Please turn to the Committee on Business submitted to the board. There were no items pulled for further discussion at agenda review. Are there any items that anyone would like to pull for discussion at this time? Seeing none, Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call?
Am I able to do new business work?
This is, new business is later.
Ready to have a roll call? Okay. Mr. Brentley?
Yes, yes, yes.
Is that 3? Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes, yes, yes.
Mrs. Fink? Yes. Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
How easily I'm forgotten.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay. Mr. McCray?
Yes on the report as a whole, and item number 15, I vote no.
Number 15?
15, yeah.
Okay. Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Now, please move on to the report on personnel that is before you that includes Addendum A. Are there any questions on the personnel report at this time? Dr. Hawley, can I ask you to turn off your mic? And
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to bring to the attention of my colleagues that we have some retirements in here this evening, and one of them is, well, first I'd like to wish everyone that is retiring a wonderful, wonderful afterlife from the Board of Education. But I especially would like to bring to our attention that I believe this evening will be the last evening that we have, is she gone already? We're Miss Ripper. I believe she's already gone. So if we can convey to her that we wish her well. And then, of course, there's also Mr. Camarda, which will still be here for a few months, but congratulations is in order. And you've taken us through some very tough times, and I'm sure that my colleagues will join me when I express to you that we're very grateful for your hard work and your dedication to this district. Thank you.
Seeing no additional discussion on the report, I'm sorry. Well, we're not today. Mr. Brentley.
I just want to ask, Ms. Spolar or Dr. Lane, can you tell me the status of those teachers who were furloughed in terms of the list? Have we worked on that list anymore in terms of returning some of those teachers?
So that list is managed by certification area. So as there are vacancies or placeholding opportunities, we use that list to fill all those vacancies. And there is no additional opportunities until those lists by certification area are exhausted.
Okay. You know, Ms. Spolar, can you, for me, please, if it's not too much trouble, for the next couple of months, can you give something in terms of a special designation when we're bringing somebody back? We may not have to do their names, but at least, so I think it's great for the public to see that if we furloughed X amount of teachers, but we're working very hard to bring some of the hardworking, dedicated staff that we had, and that as we have 1 or 2 retirements out the door, and as we replace those individuals, can you just, either point them out to us or just let us know that, you know, we were able to bring 3 more of the 80 that are still furloughed or something along that line. I think hearing it visually and just acknowledging it can also give us, some of our parents, a boost, and also other staff members a boost who are dealing with 30-plus kids in a classroom and additional responsibilities. So that would be helpful if that's not too much to ask.
Thank you. Again, typically those recalled individuals show as reinstatements, but we'll look at some way to provide that information more directly to the
Great.
board.
All righty. Thank you very much.
Mrs. Azuda.
I also want to recognize the resignation of Paulette Poncelet, who will be leaving us at the end of February, and our loss is certainly Chicago's gain, and I wish her a lot of luck.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Dr. Hawley.
I wanted to ask Mrs. Spolar and Dr. Lane or Mr. Campbell, is it a possibility for these hard-to-hire content areas for us to do distance learning? Like if, say for example, if another school has a teacher that's there and they're teaching the same content area, but another high school doesn't have a teacher for that content, are we able to do any distance learning? Maybe Mrs. Dr. Lippert and somebody. I done went around the table. I'm sorry.
We're working on actually developing the infrastructure to do that. Mark Campbell on my right here gave me that response. I can let you know that one of the things that we're working to do, one of the areas is foreign language, that we seem to have very difficult time staffing some of the world languages that we want to offer. And we are exploring opportunities where we potentially could offer Arabic at Obama, and then have another teacher who may not have the same certification that can be in the room with students as they learn Arabic to be a support, let's say at Perry High School, for example. So we are exploring those opportunities for next year.
Oh, for next year, so we couldn't do it this year.
It's partially a technology issue, and also a capacity issue on the school that has to staff a person to be in the room with the students who may not be the same certification, but still be able to supervise and support the students.
Oh, so in other words, they still have to have that certification at the school that doesn't have the teacher that's doing the teaching?
Right now, they would have to have some certification. It may not be identical to, let's say, Arabic, for example, as the example we're using right now, but they would have to be a certified.
In language?
Not necessarily, no.
They just have to be a certified teacher. That's what I wanted to know. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Holly. Ms. McCray.
Thank you. Sorry about that. But I also want to recognize Mr. Camarda. I think for the last 12 years, we've been working on the Business and Finance Committee. I think I taught you a thing or two. But you will be greatly missed, and can't say enough about it. And then I also want to recognize our employees that are serving the military and thank them for a job well done, too.
Thank you, Mr. McCray. Seeing no more Mr. Brentley.
I didn't have a chance just to congratulate those who are retiring, and so there are so many of them, and I do want to, once again, congratulate them and wish them the best in their retirement. And thank you so much for your service.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mr. Rice, may we please have a roll call?
I'll try to do this one right. Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes.
It's like Tom Brady was Sunday. Mr. Brentley's yes. Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes?
Mrs. Fink? Yes. Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Board's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Because of year-end procedures, we do not receive financial or controller reports in January or February. The board will receive reports for December, January, and February at the March 20th, 2013 legislative meeting. Mr. Eisler.
Even though people were going around the table and congratulating Mr. Camarda, you're still here until June. Simple yes or no? Yes. Thank you. That's the first. Either to Mr. Camarda and Mr. Joseph, and the questions are going to come up again next month, even though we do not have the budget, anything for the budget before us. Can you just give us some indication of where we are in terms of end of year and whether we are up or whether we are down or whether we are equal? I think it's important that we at least let the public know.
Well, currently we've been monitoring our revenues and our expenditures, and in terms of our real estate revenue, we are currently up, and our expenditures are in line with our projected expenditures.
So we're in line. Do you think we may end up spending less than we had anticipated, or is it just going to be in line? And again, I don't want to hold you to it. I'm just trying to get a little bit of a feel for where we might be a year end.
Well, currently, we're still working through our encumbrances and seeing how those fall. So we're still working on that number. So it's a little bit too early to comment on that.
Thank you, Mr. Joseph. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
Thank you. Please turn your attention to Budget Matters. Behind the Budget Matters tab in your books, there are 2 tax resolutions that were dependent on Allegheny County completing the court-ordered property reevaluations. The first resolution is the real property tax levy for fiscal year 2013. The second resolution is for the implementation of the 2013 Act 1 homestead and farmstead exclusion. Mr. Weiss, will we be voting on these as 2 separate resolutions?
Yes. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Do I need to read it first? No, okay, no. Let's make a resolution. I think I have to read it before a motion can be made? Okay. Now therefore be it resolved as follows. The School District of Pittsburgh hereby levies and assesses for the fiscal year beginning on the first day of January 2013, a school tax of 9.65 mils on each dollar of the total assessment of all real property and certified for real property assessed and certified for taxation in this district, being at the rate of 96.5 cents on each $100 of assessed valuation of taxable real property for general public school purposes pursuant to the foregoing statutory provisions, including but not limited to Section 652.1 of the Public School Code of 1949 as amended, Act 1982-182. Number 2, all of said tax has been ascertained, determined, and fixed in accordance with the law and applicable thereto, including but not limited to Special Session Act 1 of 2006, 53 PS Section 6926.101 at sequence as amended. Mrs. Khaleesi and Mrs. Azuda. Can we have discussion on the resolution? Is there any discussion on the resolution? None? Mr. McRae?
This actually reflects a lower tax rate than last year, am I correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further discussion, Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call?
Mr. Bentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Tax resolution's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. The second resolution reads, a resolution of the Board of Public Education of the School District of Pittsburgh implementing the Act 1 homestead and farmstead exclusion. Whereas on May 1st, 2012, the Department of Education informed the School District of Pittsburgh School District that its property tax reduction allocation under Act 1 is $15,576,928.55. And whereas Act 1 requires the school district to use its allocation to calculate a homestead and farmstead exclusion and to adopt a resolution implementing the exclusion for 2013. And whereas the school district has calculated a homestead and farmstead exclusion for the purpose of reducing school district property taxes. Now therefore be it resolved that the school district shall implement the homestead and farmstead exclusion for 2013 in the amount of TBD.
Oh, wait, we need a number.
Mr. Camarda, help me.
So that was very good how you read that. and I'll apologize and take responsibility that we did not update for what we had provided last week to the board. The amount you're looking for is $28,685.
Oh, I see
It will be corrected when we...
Get it?
And I'm sorry, just to, I'm going to be anal, but could I have a motion again?
So moved. Second.
Khaleesi and Fink this time. Thank you. Is there any discussion on this motion? Seeing none, Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call?
Mr. Bentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Dr. Holly?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Homestead.
Thank you. Are there any new business items that need to come before the board for board approval? Dr. Hawley.
Whereas there is strong interest in the Schenley facility being retained for future students of the Pittsburgh Public Schools, as evidenced by the more than 1,000 signatures on a petition that includes city and county council members from that district, as well as the interest generated by the recent alumni proposal. And whereas the state's Auditor General included an observation about retention of the Schenley facility in the audit issued on January 2nd, 2013 for the years ended June 30th, 2005, 2006, 2007, and 2008, that is before the board for acceptance at the January 23rd, 2013 legislative meeting. And whereas new information has been obtained about the level of asbestos at the Schenley facility that was not available at the time the facility was closed. And whereas the city controller has requested a review of the decision to close the Schenley facility in light of new information obtained since the closing. And now be it resolved that the board authorize and direct the superintendent to obtain an updated estimate of the cost to renovate the Schenley facility, with such estimate to be requested from HHSDR, which gave the best original estimate, and another qualified contractor, and with such estimate to include a detailed itemization of the work to be done, including the nature of any construction and related costs. And further resolved that given the results of asbestos testing done in 2009, the estimate should budget for removal of plaster only where there is good reason to remove the plaster in a particular area, and should contemplate minimal reconfiguration of interior walls, and that specifications that will serve as the basis for the estimate to be made available to board members in advance of seeking the estimate.
So moved.
I second it. I can't second it.
Well, Dr. Hawley, when you read the resolution, was that a motion?
Yes, I think.
Dr. Hawley, you can move it.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Discussion on the item? Mr. Brentley.
I just want to first, and I have some other comments if necessary, but I first just want to say thank you to the Honorable City Controller Michael Lamb for his comments in not necessarily support of Schenley staying open, but in support of encouraging this board to slow the process down and to get accurate numbers before you decide to move on this historic, wonderful, wonderful building here in this city. So he joins my list of folks to congratulate would include the Honorable Auditor General, the outgoing Jack Wagner, the Honorable Councilman Bill Robinson, the Honorables State Senator Leroy, Jimmy Furlow, and I believe some other former elected officials, the Honorable Randall Taylor, and others. I think it is a huge request made by the public, over 1,000 individuals who are simply saying in the kindest language, let's get good numbers. Let's do an independent evaluation of what happened, because that must be resolved. But in the meantime, let's at least get some accurate numbers. What's interesting in what I read in the paper is the 3 or 4 offers put in the paper. Some of the comments or their cost on what they would put in the building, all of them were under the numbers that were given back in 2008 by Mark Roosevelt. Mark Roosevelt said, we can't do it, it's too costly. At one point he said 60 million, then he said 70 million on a local talk show. I think he went as far as $80 million, and it was just all over the board. And unfortunately, there was no one here locally to critically analyze the rhetoric that was coming out of the administration at the time. While we fast forwarded and we clearly know what the situation is here, it simply was a bad decision, bad information, and once again, we have a wonderful opportunity to right a wrong. I support this, and I'm hoping that my colleagues would support it. We need to get it behind us. The building needs to stay in the district. Our students need to have access to it. And I have to tell you, reading the article, I think, in today's paper, and I think one of the proposals, the guy said he wanted to demolish, I think, either the gym or the swimming pool. I said, oh my God. And, you know, the money that we put into these facilities. And so, you know, we have the authority, we have the power here to do the right thing for children. And so I just want to encourage my colleagues to keep that in mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to remind some of my colleagues that, you know, as much as the asbestos is the constant term that's connected to the Schenley High School, it wasn't always the cost of the asbestos alone that caused the closing of the school. There's a lot of mechanical issues in that building. The number one issue was the ventilation system. The ventilation system was never replaced. Matter of fact, I remember clearly, and it was reminded to me today, but I remember it clearly, at one point in time, we had to put in a temporary ventilation system because we had children in there and there was plaster falling, which then becomes full of asbestos. That's when it's a problem. Not when it's intact, but when the asbestos starts to come down or the plaster falls. And they measure the humidity. But that wasn't the only issue. I mean, there was many, many other issues. And the other thing that I think that we need to keep in mind is our population is not what it was even 10 years ago. So we're going to have to, if this should ever happen and, you know, we do not sell Schenley and we reopen it, something else is going to have to close because we just don't have the population to fill another school. If we did, we wouldn't be closing schools constantly. So I'm concerned about that. So, Dr. Lane, is there anything that you can suggest to help us get through this whole process and to bring to light all the issues from back in 2008 and on that would help not just the board but the public understand everything that went and how it happened? I'm not sure I'm wording it the way that's why I'm asking you for your suggestion.
Well, dependent on what action you choose to take this evening in regard to the motion on the table, if it would serve the board's purpose, I would think it would be appropriate, no matter what, to respond to the community members who signed the petition and others that have been engaged or involved in this all along. So there's some things that we know already. We have a lot of reports on Schenley, and I know that in talking to Mr. Camarda about some of the things we have, he told me he has binders of information at this point. So, but that doesn't necessarily give a narrative of what decisions were made, when they were made, why they were made, and at what point different reports came in. If it would be helpful, and I think it might be, for us to provide a more concise explanation and referencing the documents that back it up. So what I'm saying is a narrative that says that on page 12 of such and such a report, it says the following, this is why decisions were made as they were. Having listened to conversation both by board and by community over time on this issue, I think, at least I believe, I know the board does, and I know administration does as well, understand the pain of this whole Schenley, the whole Schenley series of events. There really is nothing more difficult in a community than closing a high school. There just really isn't. And so I clearly understand the way people feel and why they might feel that way. However, the issues that I've heard that are still being contested, frankly, are things that we could address if we could provide you this written description I'm talking about. One, making reference to the reports we have, the presence or absence of asbestos-containing materials in the school, because I think that's been at issue because there are two different reports, frankly. And two different reports use two different testing methods, and so, as I said, that's been at issue. Why was it recommended that we close Schenley High School? And I think that there appears to be some concern that that, was not, I think, there are probably plenty of people that would still disagree with that recommendation, but providing some clarity around why. Why that recommendation did not change after the district received that second report. And I think that's an important point that kind of has gotten lost in the conversation. The potential cost of renovation, and of course, we all know that the level of renovation you do dictates the cost of that renovation. And so there would have to be, if we say, a minimal renovation, it certainly is going to have a far lesser cost than a more extensive one. But we do know there's some mechanical systems particularly that no matter what would be done would have to be taken care of. And so what potential costs that might be and what are the other things that we think would absolutely have to happen in order to use this facility as a school again. And then the thing that I think also we have to remember is an assessment on how realistic it would be to undertake these costs in the context of 2013. We're getting ready to go through a process right now to try to reach the dual goals of closing our budget situation as well as making sure that we have things in place to ensure achievement for our students. And that, I think, based on rolling forecasts the board has been receiving over the past, well, at least ever since I've been here, I believe, the past 6 years, it's clear there's a gap there, and it's a big one. And so I think that that is something that has to come into this conversation as well, because should a renovation take place, we would have to borrow the money. And borrowing the money means we would be paying more money back. Part of the reason that we reduced our capital borrowing 2 years ago was because we were already paying back $60 million a year in debt service, and at that point owed $471 million in borrowed money for facilities. And so trying to get the debt service payments down and and ultimately over time reduce the district debt level is part of what we've tried to accomplish here. And so that's why that was cut down from $60 million a year, which we had been doing pretty routinely, to 15. So I think that's something too that has to, be part of the conversation on this. But we know that you have a decision before you soon as to whether you want to act on it, not act on it, and that clearly is the board's choice. We can have information to you well prior to that so that it would not preclude that decision, but provide you maybe some of the information that you seek and perhaps others do as well.
Thank you, Dr. Lane. So with that being said, and the worry that I have, which is the issues in that building were not just asbestos. And I don't want everybody to walk away thinking that was the only problem. When we replaced the windows in that building, we had to do major asbestos removal work before they could even put the windows in. And don't forget that that's a historical building, which then follows those rules as well. So as much as my heart is with Shenley as well. And as much as I understand what everybody would like us to do, and I did promise to do my diligence, and I did, I can't support this at this time. You don't even know where the money's coming from. And we're headed into major financial issues as it is. So I'm sorry, but I can't support this at this time. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Mr. Eisler?
You know, I understand your concerns, Dr. Lane, but I'd like to ask a question. When you were closing Shenley and moving these, no, actually the Shenley students moved twice. The program actually moved twice. You closed Frick. How much money did you spend on redoing Frick, which had, now let's be realistic, Frick had gone through some very large numbers of renovation, lots of money was used to renovate Frick. Even prior to making it to SciTech, we added a gym, a pool, and all of that good stuff. But they had to move out and go to Reisenstein. And we also moved Shenley into Reisenstein. You paid money then to refurbish Frick. How much money did you spend there?
Dr. Hawley, I'm not prepared to start quoting costs on various buildings tonight, but I certainly can provide that to you.
Okay, and I wish you would, because we spent millions of dollars there, then millions of dollars at Reisenstein, only to have Reisenstein tore down. It's going to be torn down. Millions of dollars. I mean, just wasted money. And now you're going to tell me we can't, not you, but now we're going to say that we are not able to use funds to service children that were in this school. That school, when you look at the numbers of students that were in that school, it was highly subscribed, always had a waiting list to get into Shenley. The neighborhood students went there in droves. Everybody went there. So I'm dumbfounded as to why the school was ever closed. Parents want to know that as well. And it's not just about dripping asbestos. This district knows how to do that work. They've been doing it for years. They know how to do this. And my thing is, if the mechanical problems were so significant, why weren't those mechanical problems fixed when the school was having the mechanical problems? I don't understand that. The district has never done this before. When there's a mechanical problem, she's going to tell me that the ventilation system wasn't working. It didn't work at Lincoln. They came in, they fixed it. Why didn't they fix it at Shenley? You know, these are the problems that when you close the school and then you ask parents to just go along with it. You know, I'm sorry, I have to agree with the community. The community charged me to come in and get this on the table. And I put it on the table. But now I'm getting sort of angry because you're going to tell me there was a ventilation system that wasn't working, mechanical systems weren't working in the school, and nobody fixed it all that time? That doesn't make any sense.
Dr. Hawley, I will get as many answers for you as I can, but I would just have to say that I was not responsible for the ventilation at Shenley. Thank you.
You're right. And my hurt feelings over Shenley should not be generated towards you, and I apologize for that. But for the rest of the people who it is, we really want to know how much money you spent. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Mr. Eisler.
Thank you. Mr. Camarda, we just raised taxes, did we not, over last year? We did. So we just unanimously voted for a tax increase to the taxpayers of the city of Pittsburgh. I say that, and I also say that we have one of the highest costs per students in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. That's a wonderful thing, but it's also a very, very costly thing and costing us a tremendous amount of money. And decisions that are made by this board last years, there's no doubt about it. If we take a look at HHSDR's estimates, and there are two, one for $55 million and one for $44 million, asbestos is, and I did go through these reports at length and spent some time trying to read and understand them, just to get back up to date of some of the issues we were wrestling with, because there were a number of companies that came in to give us asbestos reports, and I think that's important to note. But there were other things, and I think, Dr. Hawley, your being upset about the mechanical system, it's something we wondered about too, because I think this district has always been proud of the fact that we maintain buildings. We did not maintain this building. I want to be clear about that. For years, many years. And there was a combination, as I remember, of new windows, no ventilation, all kinds of humidity problems. I literally, at the beginning of one of the school years, a teacher came to my office and begged me to go back to take a look at the school to see how bad the asbestos, not the asbestos, excuse me, the plaster was that was falling all over the place, which I did. I also spent some time in the ventilation, I don't know what to call it, tomb, room, garage. It was huge. The fact that we never upgraded that system was pretty stunning to me also. So I think that there are a series of things here that have happened. But I am very concerned, and Mrs. Fink and I, and this is some report that we beg to see and have not seen, our capital expenditures, to think that we went from $60 million a year to 15 in capital expenditures, we're trying to do the same with a heck of a lot less. But borrowing money, if you heard the figure, our interest costs on our debt, Mr. Camarda, is how much a year?
Nearly $60 million.
That's a lot of money that doesn't go to the instruction of children, and that's because of a lot of new buildings over years, a lot of renovations in buildings over years, but really it's the building of new buildings that we live with over a period of 20, 30 years. And we used to get on a regular basis what we used to call the bell curve, which was the up and down and when our debt was going to go down. We've got to live with that. And I am very concerned about, I mean, Schenley, I probably have not taken any greater hit on anything that I voted for because my son went there, plus a lot of his friends. It was a great school. The building was in major need of repair, of which I personally at the time did not feel that this district could afford to undertake, given where we were going and with declining enrollment. And people can argue whether or not people leave the city because of the Pittsburgh Public Schools. I don't necessarily subscribe to that. I think our birth rate has gone down drastically over the years. You can just take a look at it. There are a lot of factors here. And this does deserve, and I commend you, Dr. Lane, for bringing as much to the public as possible about this, because there are a lot of issues that can be brought before the public. But I think we have to realize the fact that we do not have a tax base that could support what it would cost to redo this school. If we just take a look just at the company, just going through some of these estimates, they range from $44 million to $86 million in 05 and 06 dollars. We have a neighboring school district that is totally redoing their high school, removing all the asbestos and really going back to the bones and rebuilding it. It is a substantial sum of money, and the building is not as old as Schenley. So I don't have the problem of taking a look at this, but I do think we have to be very, very realistic of what the taxpayers of the city of Pittsburgh can afford, given the fact that we just raised taxes this year, and given the fact that we have one of the highest cost per student rates in the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, and we hear about it every single budget year, and depending on how the governor's budget comes in and the legislature acts, and this is just something we wrestled with last year, we could be hit drastically based on attendance now versus attendance that our cost per child is figured on. So there are a lot of factors that go into this. This is not an easy thing. I think that we are transparent. We have a ton of information on the web, but what can we afford? And what can the taxpayers of the city of Pittsburgh afford? That's my question. And I go back to the fact again, might have been a small increase, but we did raise taxes this year. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
Thank you, Mr. Esser. Mr. Sumter?
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. We need, excuse me, we need to clear the air on Schenley. This board is charged with making decisions based upon receiving intelligent information. We shouldn't be afraid of facts. We shouldn't be afraid of information. And that's all this item is asking for, is information. The history of this school district and the decisions made by this board, we'll be here all night talking about the past. But there were decisions made that in totality affect what's done at certain schools and whether or not proper information was received at the time to address the issues of Schenley. So to not belabor this meeting, we can talk offline or in executive session or outside the building about the history of development projects decided by this board outside of the Schenley building. So again, I'd rather proceed with good information, not make a decision in a controversial, clouded situation, but rather make a decision on good information. Thank you.
Mrs. Fink?
Okay, it's working this time. I think we've got a lot of money invested in the reports that we already have. Certainly, there's more than one. We've had several studies done. My understanding of a big chunk of the problem at Schenley is that the ventilation system in that building, which was state-of-the-art in 1916, is no longer functioning or completely functioning. Schenley has open cores in the center of the building. And at the bottom of those open air cores, there are intake pipes. And they're large, large. And the air is drawn in by fans, which are spaced periodically throughout these long, large pipes that are encased in the walls. And as long as the fans are working and the air is moving through, there is air circulating in that building. But since 1916, things do wear out, and over the years, one after another of these fans became inoperable. When that happens, then the humidity builds up in the building. When the humidity builds up in the building, the plaster absorbs the humidity. After it absorbs so much of it, it starts to crumble. That's where the asbestos comes in, because asbestos is fine as long as it's not friable. But when the plaster is crumbling and there's asbestos in the plaster, which was a fire retardant, and that's why it was done, those little asbestos fibers are now free to roam, and you've got to take it all down in order to make it safe, and so that people don't get asbestosis or mesothelioma or whatever you get from asbestos fibers. In order to repair the fans that are encased in the walls, you're going to have to tear out the walls and tear into those pipes, unless you've got a really skinny person that can crawl through there. There is so much money that has been invested, and there are so many studies that have already been done to engage in a new one, you're going to get another set of results, which is going to be in conflict with all the results we already have, which are in conflict with each other. And if we had a lot of money, because I'm a real history buff, and I don't relish the thoughts of shutting down a building, but if you don't have the money to do it right, and we don't, then I think that we're spending a lot of time and effort and anguish trying to resurrect this building for school district purposes, when in fact the enrollment doesn't warrant us doing that. I feel very bad. I feel very bad for all the alumni and the community and whoever else wants to save that building, because I know what it's like to want to save a school, trust me.
Mr. McCray.
Thank you. I think Mrs. Fink hit upon a lot of what I was going to talk about, because one of the most critical things that people don't realize is the petrographic study that was done, which is the water content of the plaster. It's not adhering to the substrate. The more moisture, the more it falls. And the ventilation system is phenomenal for 1917, like you said, but it vented the warm, moist air out through the roof. Very inefficient in today's standards. So in order to convert all that stuff, you have to tear out the walls, and you have asbestos when you tear out the walls, like we did with the windows. So the costs just keep they just keep spiraling up. Not to mention that $05, like Mr. Eisler referred to, are different estimates because right now the building codes have changed since '05. The fire code, I know that personally, has changed since '05. And the cost has just gone through the roof again because it needs fully sprinkled now. It needs a fire pump. And those costs are just outrageous sometimes. But at this point, I think maybe, Dr. Lane, is there a way we can get a timeline on when you can get us some sort of a report, or how long you think it would take to do this?
We're not, what I was proposing does not go out and get more reports from more people. It consolidates the reports we already have and give you that information. And we can have that to you by the 15th of February.
Okay, we're not having a business meeting that month, so I guess we can discuss it at agenda review then.
Mr. Brentley?
Yes, I just want to say with all of the comments that you've heard from my colleagues proves that we need closure. While the comments were awfully convincing, I don't believe anyone here is a certified engineer or architect who can say that I can certify what I just said as to the numbers and the cost. And if you're not careful watching this, it almost serves as a scare tactic. We just increased the taxes, ooh. Fact of the matter is our job is to educate these children. And it is painful when you come back 5 or 6 years later and you look at what you've said and done back in 2008, it's bad. I didn't support it, but from a legislative point of view, it's bad to close a building based upon inaccurate information. We have the obligation to right or wrong. And also it was mentioned here by one of my colleagues that we have to be careful in our financial situation. You know, I'm cringing. I wish we would have heard that 7 years ago. This previous administration came in and woke up one morning and said, we'll close Shenley. Okay, no, we'll move to Reisenstein. Okay, well, Reisenstein's middle school. Well, we'll convert it to high school. And we put $8, $10, $12 million into Reisenstein. Okay, 4 years later, we'll close it. Nobody got upset and talked about watching the dollars then. And so we watched them take hundreds of our students, take them out of Shenley based on a lie, move them to Reisenstein, changed Reisenstein into a high school when there were 2 empty high schools nearby, Peabody and Westinghouse, changed it, and then we had to move, and then he said we want to sell it. And what do? This board gave away the Reisenstein campus, $5.1 million, pay the debt on it is $4 million. They walked away. That was we have a gun in our ribs. We gave that whole property away for $1 million or $1.2 million, whatever. And it looks like we're trying to move to the same thing here with Reisenstein, with Shenley. We owe it to the taxpayers to simply do the right thing. Yes, it's bad. Those who are out front on it and those who held information, because there are some who withheld that information. Now let's hear. They said that when the plaster was falling, well, the report said they took hundreds of samples. Only 2 came back with a trace of asbestos. Don't get angry with me. I'm reading the articles, I'm reading the reports. And so as board members, we owe it to get to the bottom of it. And those of us, or those of you who made bad decisions, thank God you get a chance to right a wrong. Those of you who are not planning on being on this board next year, at least you can go out the door saying, well, we cleaned up one thing that we made wrong. The second thing is, and Dr. Lane, I appreciate you sharing and getting us a report for it. I'm not interested. I'm not interested in rehashing what we've had already. Unless we come with a different approach, a community-based panel that would spearhead this along with board members that we can get to the bottom of it. And like Michael Lamb said in his email, is that, look, he's not saying keep it open, but you got to get to the bottom of it. Who withheld that information? Who forced us to spend millions of dollars and then to move these kids around? And now we have to find a way to if it's going to cost money, we have never even engaged the public. If you look at the 4 proposals, you know, I don't support it, but the guy from out of town, the alumni, you talking about, he should be on the board. He's dreaming the Andy Warhol visual art, and we can do this, and we can do that. I'm raising money now. Oh, how refreshing to hear somebody believe in this district and be creative and think outside the box. So I don't support him, but wherever he is, you know, thumbs up for loving the district and thinking outside the box and being creative. And so that's what we have to do with this. If we engage the community and engage those folks who signed the petition, who have tons of information, tons of resources, I think we will be pleasantly surprised as to who comes to the table. Panel, 5 to 7 individuals that would gather this information, and we can have access to some legal counsel as well, and we must move forward with the real truth report as to what happened. With that information, then we can decide to simply move forward on how we need to move with the Schenley building. Keep in mind that the question is, can we use it? Of course we can use it. You have a building that's very successful. The Obama school is almost bursting at the seams, doing extremely well. Would not only do well in the Schenley building, but would have the opportunity to expand. When a school district only has 7 schools that made AYP, then we should find a way that those schools that are successful to allow them the opportunity to expand, to at least expose other kids to their success. And I think Obama would move in and wouldn't miss a step. Our kids, 100 or 800, 900 or 1,000 of them would have access to the college university there. It would be a wonderful asset to the community, and as a board, we can simply say now we are moving in the right direction. And the other part that we have to look at and talk about at some point is the political implication. Because this thing it started off as a little ball, it is now a boulder, and it's moving. We now will possibly, based on what will happen either today as well as next month, we can now find ourselves in the middle of another negative national story, as these national individuals who have graduated are now passing information on. We could once again find ourselves as being targeted as, look, why did it happen? There were so many questions. All the community was asking for is an independent review of it. That's not unreasonable. So, you know, we cannot sit here and scare folks and say that we cannot do the right thing. We have to do the right thing. Yes, it may be painful, but I think it's the right thing to do to simply move forward. The resolution Dr. Holly has put before us is not unreasonable. It's just simply asking, let's get to the bottom of it. Who was there? Who did what? Why did it happen? And how do we find a way to simply resolve it? Thank you. Oh, and by the way, I'm sorry, if there's a committee, I want to nominate myself to chair that committee. The committee to reevaluate the Shenley situation, I will take that responsibility up.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley.
Yeah.
Mr. Isley.
Ms. Shealy. Dr. Lane or Mr. Camarda, on the two resolves, which is to obtain an estimate from HHSDR, which had two estimates actually in their report, not one, and another qualified contractor, that would be to get an estimate of the work to be done. The second piece about, I mean, and again, I think this is where the disconnect is going to happen between the two, but I'm more than happy to get a 13 update on the cost. The second thing, which is asbestos, and what it means in terms of do we have to remove, the tough thing here is that we've had the building's been closed for so long with no ventilation whatsoever. I mean, it could even be worse, but the minimal reconfiguration of interior walls, I mean, as I read this, and this is where I'm not an expert, I mean, I'm going to admit that right now, whether or not it's throughout the building or in pieces of the building, and the numbers vary from two different companies who did this. One doing it in 7, and then another, the same company doing it in 9, and changing some of their information from report to report. Could this be done, Dr. Lane or Mr. Camarda, for the agenda review meeting in February, these resolves?
If you're asking if we could have this completed by then, I can't honestly answer that at this point. We'd have to, because these are not us doing it, it would be other people. We'd have to have some indication from them if they could do that quickly. I don't think it would take long to get that if you want to go that direction, but I couldn't, as I said, sit here tonight and guarantee that it would be done in time.
I mean, I think that we're basing the estimates on what, Dr. Hawley? On what was the total renovations of the building? I mean, what is your thought here? To reopen it as a school, as a high school, with specialized services? I mean,
my thought is that it would reopen as a school.
So the estimate would be based on reopening as a school, getting the building totally ready to meet all the codes, as Mr.
Yes.
Right? So it would be, in a sense, based upon what we asked for before from the contractors, correct? But I mean, bringing it up to code, that's where the more is going to come in. I mean, it's the code of today's, right? Okay. I just want to be clear on that. What we're voting on. We're voting on two estimates, and we're voting on asbestos review.
Mr. Sumter.
Excuse me. This is an amazing dialogue about receiving information, about receiving updated information. The decision was made in 2008, and this is 2013. 5 years have passed. I want to know what the current cost would be to fix the school and what the current environmental condition is of the school. And I'm assuming that the estimate to fix the school, to rehabilitate it, would take in consideration what the environmental conditions are and ameliorate those conditions. So the debate as to whether or not to receive information taking this long, the expense for this would be minimal compared to if we were to go down the route to rehabilitate it. But you need at least intelligent information to move forward. Thank you.
Dr. Lane, I would just have one request with, regardless of the outcome of this vote, in the information that you offer to summarize, could you include the academic achievement of the students in Shenley segregated by magnet and feeder pattern children?
Yes, I believe we should have that information available.
Thank you.
Asking that for the purpose of opening up the school, or what?
For the purpose of having information on, I was not here when they made the 2008 decision to close the school. So for the purpose of having the full information on that, that would be useful.
Okay. And are you going to compare it with some other high school as well? Are you going to like compare it with Brashear, for example? Are you going to compare it with Perry?
Well, the claim has been made that Shenley was a successful school. And my understanding or my recollection is that the children who were in the feeder pattern program were not necessarily being served.
Okay, so are we going to compare it with the Milan students that are there now? I mean,
They're not the same kids.
You're comparing
They're not the
apples
same
and
kids.
oranges here. So if you're going to do that, then you're going to have to pull up all the high schools.
I don't have to, no. Dr. Lane, did you get my request? Okay, thank you. Mr. Weiss, may we have a vote?
So roll call on the new business item brought forward by Dr. Hawley. Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Ms. Scalese?
No.
Mrs. Fink? No. Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
No.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
The new business item is approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Are there any other new business items to be brought before this board for a vote? Seeing none, can I please?
No, I don't. I want to just make a comment, but not a.
I just want to close out new business voting.
Yeah. Okay, no, I'll share that with you, because it
Okay.
could be a vote, but it's not, so.
Okay, thank you. Are there any announcements for the board, Mr. Brentley?
Yeah, I was going to say that, Dr. Lane, can I ask you also to, if you can direct the staff to come back with this board with a preliminary report on the status of the Bergwin building, its condition, what it would cost to get it open. I mean, I'm willing to put something on the floor if I have to, but I just thought if we direct that to you to at least give us some kind of feel on having someone to walk through, give us a condition of what it looks like and possibly what it would take to get the facility open.
Yes, we can.
No, that was the one thing, but I do have some other things. You want me just, okay. Let's see. Oh, I have to, this is, of course, we were just recognized as, is new business? Is this new business?
No, we're done.
Oh.
Business. We're announcements.
Okay, announcements. Okay, yeah, I'm in the right place. Okay. I just want to recognize, this month is Board Recognition Month, and I will be this Friday participating in an annual breakfast with students at Allegheny School, and I do want to acknowledge the PTO officers there, and just to thank them for that. The president of the PTO is Gianni Haley. Khadija Gray is the PTO vice president. Dina Martin is the PTO treasurer. And Russ Stratton is the PTO volunteer coordinator. The student presenters will be Erica Morton, Madison Blake, and Aaliyah Carpenter. And what happens every year is just something that it's really exciting to see. The elected student council officers actually host a breakfast with me, and I think we're going on probably 4th or 5th year. The principal there, Mrs. O'Malley, is doing a wonderful job there, and of course she is following the previous administration there under the leadership of Ms. Viola Burgess, who actually started it. And it is a day that I look forward to every year. I take the day off, and I sit and have breakfast, and the students are very proper, and they ask questions, and they're dressed so nice. And then I also have an opportunity to acknowledge them as elected officials. So I told them that I would put their names in the official name in the board minutes, and if they want to get copies of it, they can see that their names are in the minutes. And I'll be there this Friday and want to thank them for that. I do want to just read this one thing quickly. And Dr. Lane, if you can make sure that all of our schools have this, this is to show how much you appreciate your teacher. It's a contest for middle and high school students to participate. Simply write an essay, poem, or a thank you letter explaining how a teacher has influenced your life, and then you explain. This is given by Barnes & Noble. I do have an extra one. There are some grand prize winners. There's a $5,000 prize, etc. If you can make sure that our students or every school, every middle and high school would have one of these, because for what we've been through over the last year or so, it may be a wonderful opportunity for one of our students to explain in writing, out of all of the challenges that we've been through, that there's still that shining star out there. And if we can allow them that opportunity to enter into this contest, it would be a great thing for them to put out there. The final thing, and this is to you, Madam President, there's one small item that's outstanding in the board office. It's now a bigger issue. That is, you remember this Take a Father to School Day, the national award we received, and of course in this magazine were pictures. Those pictures, award-winning pictures, were provided by a local photographer. And the last time that I checked, we have not evened up the task for her. There is an outstanding tab that we still owe her. It is under $300. And the last time I checked, it was an outstanding for the last 4 or 5 months. And I am asking you to please, if you, as the President and Executive Committee, they have the invoice in the office, please, if someone can take care of this outstanding bill. It is the women-owned business, and we have to find a way to treat them a little better. And so I've asked, and she's been very patient. She submitted it. It won, and we should find a way to take care of business a little better. This is not directed to you, but the previous administration did not pay the outstanding bill. So I'm asking if you would take care of that ASAP. I would truly, truly appreciate that. And here's the magazine again, and here are the pictures of those who have forgot it. Over 31,000 copies across this country, and she won, and it was submitted, and we have not paid her. So please, if there's anything I can do to help to speed that process up and even apologize, I'm willing to do that as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Brentley. Mrs. Khaleesi.
Thank you, Madam Chair. On February 14th, it will be John Minadeo, would have been, forgive me, John Minadeo's 74th birthday. In Montagano, Italy, there is also a John Minadeo school, which is also named after John Minadeo. That is where he was born. And those of you that don't know who John Minadeo is, he was a crossing guard for us. What did I say? Safety Patrol, thank you. You completely let me lose my train of thought. Approximately 60 years ago. And he died trying to save children from a car that lost control, lost their brakes on Hazelwood Avenue. And at the time, John Minadeo was the school that he was attending, I guess what he was attending was what is today known as Gladstone. In honor of his 74th birthday, the school in Italy will be having a teleconferencing or a Skyping with the school here. And And that will be on February 14th at 9:30, and you're all, of course, invited to be there. The students will be participating in trying to speak to each other in the two languages. We will have some translators there. Mr. David Maystein will be assisting as well. So I encourage all of you to join us and help us celebrate the wonderful memorial of this gentleman. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Khaleesi. Mrs. Azuda.
I want to apologize for that bill not being paid. I remember when it originally came through and there was some confusion because it was not authorized in advance, but I thought we had paid it. So Mrs. Wenger and I will follow up on that to see what happened with it. I just want to say thanks to Dr. Sandy Oak and the students at Carmel. Every student at Carmel was involved in creating these boxes for us, which I think is pretty cool to organize such a feat with that size of a school. And we were laughing at looking at some as people were holding it, but mine says, think outside the gift wrap box. So that's what we got to do. So thank you, Dr. Oak and the students at Carmel.
Thank you, Mrs. Azuda. Dr. Hawley.
Yes. Last month, we voted on having a conference, basically, with some of our African-American male students. And I must admit that I was a little bit taken back about doing this project. I thought that it was going to be a little bit too much for the males that were coming there, and it would single them out. But I have to say that I was pleasantly surprised at how well organized the program was, what was actually transpiring there with the some of the males from the community and the students themselves. It turned out to be a very remarkable program and one that I really touched my heart. So I want to thank Dr. Lane for having this program. I also want to thank Vi Burgess for all of her hard work as she ran around Greenway in her pumps. She never took off her high heel shoes. I said, girl, go ahead. But it was a program that I thought essentially did what it started out to do, which was raise the consciousness of the students to reach for the promised dollars. And I'm hoping that this project will continue, that we will look at this project later on during the year and see that these children actually are promise ready for next year. So again, thank you.
Excuse me. Thank you, Dr. Hawley. Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. I want to also second the comments by Dr. Hawley. It was a fantastic program in terms of how people entered and how they left. And the key word was transformation. And you could see that that program was transformative in the students that attended, and transformative for the adults that attended also, because it was a nice, large crowd of individuals that cared about individuals and were doing what they could to help individuals. And the whole theme was we promise. And we promise to get all of our students. We don't promise, we can't guarantee it, but we want all of our students to be promise ready. And as always, to invest in our students' future, give to the Pittsburgh Promise, give to need, and give to the Homewood Children's Village. Thank you.
Yes. Mr. Eisler.
Now, I want to thank Dr. Hawley and Mr. Sumter. I think one of the things that does not get the recognition it deserves is the promise. I think talking to young people who have received the promise and who have been able to go to college as a first step and then go on beyond is just amazing. And to hear parents say, you know, what this city has done, what this community has done is phenomenal. It may be time, Ms. Shealy, that we ask Mr. Gabriel to come in and talk about the promise and what it's doing, because it is reaching out, as Dr. Hawley and Mr. Sumter just said, to try to get more and more children to be able to take advantage of the promise and the post-secondary opportunities that they have available to them. I think the other thing that is very, very significant is just the group starting in terms of the Promise Keepers, not just the board and the number of community leaders that have put in their time and effort on this project and to keep this project alive, but also the new organization, Promise Keepers, and just to see what is going on in terms of raising the fund to keep it viable. So I think it'd be good to have Mr. Gabriel in and Mr. Sumter, a meeting. I've never been at a public meeting with you ever where you have not raised an issue about the promise. And again, I thank you for that, because I think we have to keep it in the forefront that although we are giving students a great start, there is a lot more that they can do with their lives. And I just think that the promise does not get the recognition from this community as a whole that it should. And when you see these young people and some of the publications that are now coming out, showing where these students are employed is really, really significant. And seeing corporations who are taking them on as they are entering into their post-secondary experiences, again, the corporate community could not be a better supporter of those corporations. Thank you. And one other thing, and I did pass this on to Dr. Lane, and I think it is a bit of good news coming out of Harrisburg. It is my understanding that the Governor's School for the Sciences is going to be resurrected at Carnegie Mellon this year. And so I think as many of our students who can apply would be great. They do not take a lot of students, but it is another significant step forward in terms of support of education in the Commonwealth. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
Thank you. May we have a motion? Mr. Sumter.
Thank you, Ms. Shealy. I just want to take advantage of this opportunity because we are broadcast. The purpose of the summit, or at least the workshops that were conducted there, centered around branding. And it did examples of national brands, name brands, and things like that. But it turned into, if you were to brand yourself, how would you brand yourself? What goals? Where do you want to see yourself later on? What do you have as priorities? What's important in your life? So that's some of the transformation as far as getting self-assurance, how you present yourself, how do other people look at you. So that's just to give you a little flavor of some of the things we're going on there in terms of that transformation. So it was good icebreakers, good workshops, great keynote address or speech by Mr. Noguera, Pedro Noguera, and it was just a good event. So I wanted the public to know a little bit more. If you haven't read it in the Post-Gazette, which was published the day after the event, and in today's Pittsburgh Courier, which would be January 23rd, there's an article in there about the event. So it was a worthwhile event. Thank you, Ms. Shealy.
Please turn to the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver meeting. I'd like to call the January 23rd meeting of the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit to order. Mr. Weiss, can we have a roll call?
Mr. Brentley?
Here.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Here.
Mrs. Fink? Here. Mrs. Azuda?
Here.
Dr. Hawley?
Here.
Mr. Eisler?
Present.
Mr. McCray?
Here.
Mr. Sumter?
Present.
Ms. Shealy?
Here.
All present.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. Will board members please turn to the minutes from last month? Are there any corrections, additions, or deletions? Mrs. Khaleesi.
I was not on the phone during this portion of the meeting, and it's stating in the minutes that I was, as though I voted, and I did not. So I'd like that correction for the record.
And the correction, if I may continue, of the votes, because they were not 9-0 votes, they would have been 8-0 votes.
Right, that's-
Or 7, yes. All
Thank
that
you.
has to be corrected.
Right,
I was going to
Mr.
raise the
Eisler,
same
that's
thing.
really what I
You
was
did
trying
get
to-
off the phone.
That's what I was trying to get to, is that it's incorrect.
Hearing that correction and no others, move to approve the minutes.
Eisler, Khaleesi. Yeah, you can't second it. Huh? Jean did. I'm sorry, Mrs. Fink provided this second. I don't think you can. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign?
You said same sign.
Okay. The minutes are approved. Mrs. Khaleesi voted against approving the minutes. We don't, yes, Mr. Weiss, just, we're good, right? Thanks. Please turn to the Committee on Education. There were no items pulled from the committee at agenda review. Are there any questions that were not addressed? Mr. Sumter?
Thank you, Ms. Shelley. It's not so much a question, but a comment, or questions can arrive from that. Item number C in the Committee on Education is for a blended learning introduction to theory and practice, which is our investment in an online course. With blended learning means part online, part teacher assistance. My concern would be, could we possibly monitor this course, or could we possibly glean information from that that would be of benefit to the district? So that's what I asked in that. If we're going to invest in this, pay for it, can we learn something from it ourselves? So that's more or less a hope or a desire. It doesn't have to be answered at this time, but I think we should keep that in mind, that as we move along, there may be opportunities that we create or bring about blended learning, online learning. We already have an online academy, but a blended learning is a little more than just that. So it's part online and part not. But if there's anything we can get from this, I would appreciate it.
So, Mr. Sumner, that's an excellent question, and Dr. Lippard's team has already contacted me to talk to Ellis to see if they can observe how they're going along with this procedure, and so we're waiting for Ellis to get back to us.
Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, Mr. Weiss, may we have a roll call, please?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. But please move on to the committee report on business that is before us. Are there any questions on the report that were not addressed at agenda review? Seeing none, Mr. Weiss, may we please have a roll call?
Mr. Brentley?
Yes.
Mrs. Khaleesi?
Yes.
Mrs. Fink?
Yes.
Mrs. Azuda?
Yes.
Dr. Hawley?
Yes.
Mr. Eisler?
Yes.
Mr. McCray?
Yes.
Mr. Sumter?
Yes.
Ms. Shealy?
Yes.
Report's approved.
Thank you, Mr. Weiss. There are no personnel items this evening for the Pittsburgh Mount Oliver Intermediate Unit. Are there any other items that need to be brought before the board at this time?
Motion to adjourn.
Eisler, Khaleesi. All in favor? Aye. This meeting is adjourned.